There is a door inside of you. You have walked past it 1,000 times. You have felt the draft beneath it. You have sometimes pressed your ear against it and heard something humming on the other side. Something warm, something vast, something that smelled like the life you have always known you were supposed to be living. And yet, you turned away. Not because you were afraid, though perhaps you were. Not because you lacked the desire, because the desire has always been there, burning quietly beneath everything else. But because no one ever handed you the key and told you what it was truly for. Today, that changes. What I am about to offer you is not a technique. Understand this deeply from the very beginning. Techniques are tools for the outer world, for the world of effort and effect, for the world of doing more and pushing harder and optimizing the surface of life. What we are stepping into together is something far more intimate than a technique. It is a truth, a living, breathing, ancient truth that has shaped empires and transformed ordinary men and women into walking miracles. It is a truth that the mystics carried quietly in their hearts, a truth that certain scriptures whisper in the spaces between the literal words if you know how to listen. A truth that your own soul has been knocking at your ribs to remind you of since the moment you arrived here, since the very first breath, since the very first awareness that you were something separate from everything else, something that could choose, something that could create. You came into this life already equipped with everything you need, not with the circumstances you want, not yet, but with the capacity, the profound, sacred, limitless capacity to bring them into being. That capacity does not live in your work ethic, though effort has its place. It does not live in your connections, though relationships carry their own grace. It does not live in luck or timing or the favor of the powerful. It lives in something so close to you that you have nearly overlooked it your entire life. It lives in your word. More specifically, it lives in the two most consequential words your mouth has ever formed. It lives inside two words, just two, and yet these two words contain within them the entire architecture of your experience. Every relationship you have ever had, every door that opened or stayed shut, every season of abundance or scarcity, every time you felt unstoppable and every time you felt invisible, all of it traces back to these two words and what you placed after them. Because these two words are not merely grammar. They are not simply a pronoun and a verb arranged in the most basic possible sentence. They are a declaration of being. They are the code that the universe reads when it decides what to send in your direction. They are the command that your deepest self is always, always obeying, whether you are paying attention or not. I am. Let that settle within you for a moment. Not as a phrase you have heard before, not as a spiritual cliché you can nod at and scroll past. Let it land this time with the full weight it carries. Because those two syllables, I am, are the most powerful arrangement of sound you will ever produce. They are more consequential than any prayer you have ever recited from a book. More formative than any resolution you have ever written at the start of a new year. More creative than any strategy you have ever mapped out on a whiteboard or a notepad. I am is not followed by description. It is followed by destiny. Think about this for a moment. Right now, in the quiet corners of your mind, you are already using these words. Every single hour, you are finishing that sentence. I am tired. I am behind. I am not the kind of person who gets things like that. I am stuck. I am afraid this is as good as it gets. You say these things with the casual fluency of someone reading a weather report, as though they are simply observations about the world outside. But they are not observations. They are orders. They are spoken directly into the subconscious, that vast and obedient intelligence that does not question what you tell it, does not debate the merits of your declarations, does not hold a mirror up and say, "Are you sure?" It simply responds. It shapes. It sculpts your perception, your choices, your behavior, your energy, and ultimately, your reality around whatever you have most consistently and most believingly spoken into the sentence that begins with those two words. This is the gravity of it, and it demands your full attention. You are not here to receive information and walk away the same person. Something in you recognized that this moment mattered before you fully understood why. That recognition was not accidental. It was the deeper part of you, the part that has always known the truth, pulling you toward what it has been trying to whisper to you for years. So stay with this. Let yourself be changed by it. Not because I am asking you to, but because the change is already underway. The seed was planted the moment you began to listen. Now, the reason most people live lives that feel narrower than the life they sense inside themselves, and you know this feeling, you have felt the gap between who you are and who you know yourself to be. The reason that gap persists is not lack of effort. It is not bad luck. It is not some cosmic unfairness, though in darker moments it can feel that way. It is not the economy or your upbringing or the timing of your birth or the wounds from people who should have known better. The reason the gap persists is simpler and more profound than any of those explanations. It is this. Most people have been trained to speak from their circumstances rather than from their creation. They look at what is and then use the language of being to describe it. They say, I am broke, because their bank account reflects that. They say, I am alone, because the chair across the table is empty. They say, I am powerless, because the situation they are in has not moved in months. And here is the cruel paradox. Every time they speak that way, with the authority of I am, with the resonance of identity, they deepen the very circumstance they are describing. They add weight to it. They give it more substance than it deserves. Because circumstances are temporary by nature, but identity is structural. Circumstances rise and fall like weather, but what you identify as persists and recreates itself endlessly, season after season, year after year. So when you attach I am to a circumstance, you elevate that circumstance into the realm of identity. And now it is no longer just something that happened to you. It is something you are, and what you are, you reproduce. What you identify as, you perpetuate. What you declare as your being, you manifest without fail, without exception, without any real effort at all, because the identity does not have to try to produce what matches it. It simply does. That is the terrifying and magnificent truth of it. This is why it matters so enormously what follows those two words. The truth is this: you have never been describing your life, you have been prescribing it. Every declaration you have made, whispered, thought, muttered under your breath, or written in your journal, these were not passive reflections of a world happening to you. They were active instructions issued by the most powerful creative force in your universe, which is your own consciousness, to the most obedient manufacturing system ever designed, which is your own subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind does not evaluate. It does not filter. It does not protect you from your own negative self-talk. It simply receives, accepts, and then organizes the whole of your inner and outer experience to be consistent with what you have told it you are. This is both the burden and the gift. The burden, because you realize that everything you have spoken carelessly has had real consequences. The gift, because you realize that the moment you begin to speak deliberately, the whole system shifts in your favor. And so the invitation is this: not to lie to yourself, not to perform positivity like a costume over your honest pain, but to do something far braver, to dare to speak from the person you intend to be rather than the person your past has produced. To say, I am, with the boldness of someone who understands that words are not just air. Words are the invisible architecture of the world you are building. Consider this: before a building exists, it exists in the mind of the architect. Before the first stone is laid or the first beam is raised, the entire structure lives in imagination first, in language, in the declaration, this is what we are building. The physical structure is only ever the last step. And so it is with your life. Everything you will ever experience in the outer world has to first be constructed in the inner world. And the construction begins with what you say when you say, I am. Now there is something else you must understand. Something that the world of effort and achievement has not told you clearly enough. The power of these words does not only lie in how you speak them outwardly. It lies, perhaps more importantly, in how you guard them inwardly. Because there is a silence that is more eloquent than any proclamation. A silence that protects what you are building before it is strong enough to withstand the weight of other people's doubts. When you plant a seed, you do not invite the whole neighborhood to come and observe the dark soil where nothing yet appears. You do not hold open houses for the invisible. You trust, you tend, you protect, and you wait with the knowing that underneath what the eye cannot yet see, something extraordinary is becoming real. Your declaration is the same. The moment you carry a new I am into the presence of someone who lives entirely by the logic of what is visible, something happens. Not because they are malicious, not because they do not love you, but because they are translating your inner knowing through the filter of what they can see. And what they can see is the old version of you, the version that hasn't yet caught up to the identity you have chosen. And so they offer their analysis, their well-meaning questions, their gentle, reasonable doubts. And each of those doubts is a cold wind against the most tender part of your becoming. Let this sink into your spirit. You do not need the world to believe in your transformation before your transformation becomes real. In fact, the opposite is often true. The transformation happens most powerfully in the space before the world can see it, in the silence, in the solitude, in the quiet repetition of a new truth told to no one but the deepest part of yourself. There is immense wisdom in the creative power of hiddenness. Every great thing begins hidden. The human body forms in the darkness of the womb. The star is born inside a cloud of dust and gas, invisible for thousands of years before it finally burns. The breakthrough idea lives in the mind for months or years before it becomes the thing the world applauds. That period of invisibility is not weakness, it is gestation. And gestation requires protection. So when the impulse comes to announce what you are becoming, to seek external confirmation of your inner shift, to lay your seed out on the table and ask others if they think it will grow, notice that impulse. Understand it. And then, gently, firmly, choose silence instead. Not forever, not as a form of secrecy or isolation, but as a form of sacred stewardship. Hold the word, hold the vision, nourish it with your own unwavering belief, and let the world see it only once it has taken root so deeply that no one's doubt can pull it free. This is how the ancients protected their revelations, not out of arrogance, not out of exclusivity, but out of the profound understanding that what is sacred must be sheltered, that what is forming must be protected from the friction of unbelief until it is solid enough to withstand it. Now let us go even deeper, because there is a dimension of this truth that is more radical than anything we have touched yet. And it requires you to look honestly, courageously at the shape of your own interior world. You do not get what you want, you get what you are. Sit with that, feel it, because there is a profound difference between wanting and being, and most human suffering lives exactly in that gap. People chase outcomes without ever becoming the version of themselves who naturally inhabits those outcomes. They try to acquire the life before they have built the identity. And so even when something they wanted arrives, they cannot keep it, because inside themselves, in the architecture of their self-concept, there is no room for it. The identity rejects what does not match its own self-image, the way a body rejects a transplanted organ that wasn't meant for it. This is why real transformation is an inside job in the most literal sense, not metaphorically, literally. The outer world is a reflection, a mirror, and you cannot rearrange the reflection by pushing at the glass. You have to change the one standing in front of it. Allow yourself to see this clearly. If you carry inside yourself the deep, unspoken belief that you are not the kind of person who succeeds, then success, when it comes anywhere near you, will feel foreign, threatening, uncomfortable, and you will unconsciously push it away. You will self-sabotage, not because you are broken, but because your identity is loyal. It is only doing its job, which is to keep your outer experience consistent with your inner definition of yourself. This is why the work is not hustle. The work is reconstruction, the daily, patient, deliberate reconstruction of who you believe yourself to be. It is speaking "I am" and attaching to it something larger than your history. It is imagining yourself not from the outside looking in at what you wish you had, but from the inside out, as the person who already is what you have claimed. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to walk into a room, not hoping for acceptance but extending it, not waiting to be chosen but choosing, not performing confidence but emanating it, not because something external changed, but because something internal settled. That settled quality, that quiet authority, it does not come from achievement, it comes from identity. It comes from the daily practice of speaking and living and breathing from the assumption of who you truly are. This brings us to the sacred practice of imagination, which has been misunderstood almost universally in the modern world. We have reduced imagination to fantasy, to escapism, to something children do before they grow up and learn to deal with reality. But imagination is not the enemy of reality. Imagination is the womb of reality. It is where all things begin before they arrive. It is the first and most essential stage of creation, not the last resort of those who cannot handle what is, but the first power of those who intend to determine what will be. You are already imagining. Every moment of every day, your mind is producing images, scenarios, rehearsals. The question is not whether you are imagining, the question is what you are imagining and from where. Most people imagine from their wounds. They picture the future through the lens of what has gone wrong before. They see the version of the conversation that ends in rejection, the version of the venture that ends in failure, the version of the relationship that ends in abandonment. And they call this being realistic. But this is not realism. This is the habitual rehearsal of fear, and the subconscious mind, which cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is actually occurring, treats it as instruction. It says, "This is what my person expects. This is what I will help produce." You must understand this. The imagination is always creating. The only choice you have is whether you will direct it consciously or allow it to run on the unexamined programs of your past. To direct it consciously means this: you choose the scene. You do not imagine toward the future from where you are now. You imagine from the future, from the scene already fulfilled, already complete. You place yourself in the emotional state of the person who has already received what you have declared. You do not see it as coming. You see it as arrived. You feel the texture of it, the ease of it, the naturalness of it. You make it so familiar through repetition and emotional embodiment that your nervous system begins to treat it as home, as the baseline, as the default expectation. And here is what happens when you do this consistently. When you hold that imagined state not as a dream you are chasing, but as a reality you are already inhabiting. The outer world, slowly, sometimes suddenly, begins to reorganize itself. Opportunities arise that seem to come from nowhere. Doors open that you never knocked on. Conversations take unexpected turns. Resources appear. The right people step into your path at precisely the right moment. You did not force any of this. You created the conditions for it by changing the interior atmosphere from which you were operating. This is not magical thinking. This is the most precise and sophisticated understanding of how consciousness and circumstance interact. You are not sending messages into the universe like bottles thrown into the ocean, hoping something hears you. You are working with the direct relationship between your inner state and the world that forms around it. Change the state, and you change what the world reflects back at you. This is not hope. This is structure. But let me be honest with you about something that most teachers of this material will not tell you directly. The hardest part is not understanding this. You have understood it now, or something in you has recognized it as already known. The hardest part is not motivation. You are motivated. The hardest part is not even the imagination practice itself, though that requires discipline. The hardest part is what comes after. It is the period between the declaration and the manifestation, the time between planting and harvest, the gap between the inner shift and the outer evidence. Because in that gap, the world will not yet have adjusted. Your bank account will still show what it showed. Your reflection will still show what it showed. The people around you will still see the old version of you, because that is all they have been shown. And in that period, doubt is not a distant possibility. Doubt is a daily visitor. It knocks at the door of your mind with the evidence of everything you have always feared was true. It speaks in a calm, sensible voice. It says, "Look around you. Nothing has changed. Maybe you were mistaken. Maybe this does not apply to you. Maybe you are the exception to whom it does not work." And if you open the door to that voice, if you give it a seat at the table, it will eat your vision alive. So you must become a guardian, not a passive receiver of spiritual wisdom, but an active, vigilant custodian of the territory of your own mind. This guardianship is not aggression. It is not white-knuckling your way through doubt, or building walls of spiritual rigidity around you so high that nothing can get in. It is a kind of holy vigilance, a daily decision to return to your declared identity, even when, especially when, the outer world is still catching up. The prophet guards the word before it takes form. The farmer guards the field before the harvest comes. The mother guards the child before it is ready for the world. And you must guard the seed of your becoming with that same tenderness and that same fierceness, both at once. This means monitoring what you say in moments of frustration, because those are the moments when the old identity speaks with the most authority. When things are hard, when it is late and you are tired and nothing seems to be working, the old voice is loudest. "I knew this would not work. I always end up here. Nothing ever really changes for me." These are not truths, they are echoes. Old recordings that your mind plays when it is under pressure and looking for something familiar to hold on to. And if you speak them out loud, if you give them form and voice, you do not simply express your frustration. You reinforce the very architecture you have been working to dismantle. You chisel words of limitation into the foundation of the identity you were building. So you learn to catch them, not to shame yourself for having them. That is not the work, and shame has never freed anyone. The work is to notice them, name them for what they are, and redirect. To say, "This is not my declaration. My declaration is, I am," and then return to the word you have chosen. Every time, without exception. Not perfectly, because you are human and perfection is not the standard. Consistently, because consistency is what reshapes the subconscious. Persistently, because persistence in the face of doubt is the clearest signal you can send to every layer of your being that you have made your choice and you are not going back. You must also guard what you allow in from the outside. The voices you expose yourself to, the conversations you participate in, the media you consume, the people you sit with in moments of vulnerability. Not all of these are bad, but not all of them are building the identity you have claimed. Some of them are subtly, persistently, lovingly reinforcing a version of you that no longer exists. And you have to make discerning choices about how much access you grant them to your interior world. This is not about cutting people out of your life or becoming someone who floats above community in a cloud of spiritual superiority. It is about understanding that your consciousness is a garden, and not everything that presents itself at the gate wants to nourish what you are growing. Weeds do not announce themselves as weeds. They look ordinary. They grow quietly. And if you are not watching, if you are not maintaining the intentionality of your inner environment, you wake up one day and the garden has changed without your permission. Something you spent months tending has been slowly crowded out by things you let in without thinking. So you tend, daily, moment by moment. You return to the word. You return to the imagined state. You return to the identity you have chosen, as though returning to a home you love. Because that is exactly what you are doing. You are coming home to who you actually are, beneath the layers of conditioning and fear and years of misidentification. The real you. The you that existed before the world taught you to be small, before the rejections and disappointments layered themselves over your original knowing. That you has always known what to say after I am. You are simply learning to trust it again. You are simply clearing away what was placed over it and reclaiming what was always yours. And here is the most beautiful part. The part that makes all of this worth the discomfort and the discipline and the vigilance. When you hold the word long enough, when you have maintained the assumed identity through enough cycles of doubt and return to it again and again without abandoning it, something shifts that cannot be shifted back. The new identity stops feeling like something you are trying to become and starts feeling like something you simply are. It settles into the body. It becomes the default. It becomes the lens. And from that place, from that new settled ground, you begin to move through the world differently without even trying to. Not performing the new identity, not reaching for it with that slightly desperate energy of someone who is not quite sure they deserve it, but embodying it the way you embody your own name, effortlessly, inevitably, completely. This is what Neville Goddard meant when he spoke of living in the end. Not imagining the end as a destination you are moving toward, some distant finish line you can see but cannot touch, but inhabiting it as a present reality, as the place from which you see and speak and act. Not the person who is trying to become abundant, but the person who is abundant and moving through the world from that truth. Not the person who is working toward being loved, but the person who is loved and who extends love from that fullness. The end is not in the future. The end is the state you choose to inhabit now. And the outer world, in time, will conform to it. It has no other option. It has never had another option. This is the law. Not the law of attraction as a kind of cosmic vending machine, but the law of consciousness, which says simply and permanently that what you are inwardly, consistently and believingly becomes what you experience outwardly, inevitably and completely. There is no exception to this law. There is no person for whom it does not apply. There is no circumstance powerful enough to override it when it is engaged with full sincerity and full commitment. The law does not make exceptions for how long you have struggled, for how deep the wound goes, for how many times you have tried and fallen back. It responds only to the present state.